What is up, everyone? Welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video. Hope you guys are having an amazing Sunday. Horrible and rainy here in the UK, guys. Everything feels so grey. It just makes you want to literally sit indoor and do absolutely nothing. And talking about that, let me know in the comments down below if you guys watched any good movies or any good TV shows recently, because I am looking for something to watch later on and probably throughout the week, because they have announced lots and lots of rain here in the UK. And let me know how is the weather where you guys are living. In today's video, we're gonna have a look at the new bosses, guys, that will be added, of course, with the Grim Forest content. Now, we already saw two of them, the Goblin, the Greedy One, and the Mimic Chest. They seem pretty damn crazy, but we have 5 more bosses. We have a main boss and 4 which are called boss minions, even though they have some crazy skills and they can be crazy bosses on their own. They are giving you the option to fight 5 bosses at the same time if you want to, which won't yield any additional rewards. So you're kind of like wondering, what the heck would I put myself through that pain and misery? Well, I guess if you are a filthy degenerate kraken that feels that nothing is challenging in the game, I guess that's the right stuff for you. But for the rest of you, probably you don't want to try that out. I might try it once as well, just for the giggles, because why not? But probably it's not something that I'm gonna be doing every single rotation. And I am expecting this patch to be released Thursday. I don't think it's gonna be Wednesday, because we still have the siege going on, but I think Thursday is the day. I'm personally looking forward to get more rewards. But let's start with the bosses. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the main one. We're going to talk about it at the end. We have Draugnal, the Eternal Gatherer. Make sure you guys let me know in the comments down below, once we're done with them, which one of them you think is the toughest one. So, this is a Void Affinity boss. With the first skill, attacks all enemies and places a provoke for 2 turns. I mean, why not? Why not put it for 100 of them? Sounds like a strong basic skill. Then you have the second skill, which is an AoE, places a decreased attack and a defense down for 2 turns. Really solid as well, on a 3-turn cooldown. Then you have the third skill on a 3-turn cooldown, where he attacks all enemies and places a freeze debuff for 1 turn. It will steal the thermometer from each target under a freeze debuff. Then you have the passive. Whenever he is attacked, has a chance of placing a freeze debuff on the attacker, and he will decrease the speed of enemies under freeze by 50%. Now, your best weapon versus this boss is going to be immunity. I'm talking about champions that will put block debuffs on your team. I think, in my opinion, the number 1 for this will be Raiho Bone Spear. Why? Because she will cleanse, she will bring immunity, she will heal, she will bring debuffs, which will be very important, but she has the passive. Even if she gets provoked by the A1 and the passive procs, it's going to reflect that provoke back and still cleanse the team, which is really, really good. I am expecting these bosses to be extremely fast as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that the next passive on the boss will basically make the boss and all of his allies immune to ignore defense effects. Now, we are relying on raw damage dealers. The whole idea is that enemy max HP damage dealers will have a cap at 5%. HP burn won't do a lot of damage either, unfortunately. And what else you have? Raw damage dealers. Maybe Geomancer is going to be goated in here. We're going to have to basically wait and see, because he will reflect 50% of the damage he receives back onto the attacker, the boss, right? But there's a condition. If the boss is under HP burn, the reflect damage will not happen, which is really good. That's why a Raiho Bone Spear, he will bring the HP burn as well, next to the cleanse, which is really good. But if you're looking at different champions, Raiho was guaranteed in the past. I know a lot of you guys don't have, but there are plenty of different cleansers in the game that bring you immunity. Pythian is a very good one of them as well, because he revives. You have loads of them, right? But a Geomancer could potentially do very good damage because of the passive, right? I'm definitely going to try him in here. Now, of course, he's immune to all of the crowd control debuffs as usual. We have the Awakening passive, which increases the damage, decreases the damage taken based on how high your blessing is. Almighty Strength, damage from skills that scale based on enemy max HP cannot exceed 5% of his own HP. Then he is immune to decreased speed and thermiter reductions. I mean, why not? And the damage from HP burn debuffs cannot exceed 1% of the boss's max HP, which is not that great. I'm not sure how many minions we're gonna have with this boss, if we're gonna have any, but based on this passive as well, saying all his allies, I'm not sure if he will have minions or it's just mainly a passive that will trigger when you have him together with the other bosses fighting the main boss. But he's a very powerful boss. I think Geomancer, probably Newt as enemy max HP, Marius champions like this can be good, because if you cannot ignore any defense, you're barely gonna do any damage with a Thurvold or other champions that hit really hard. But probably even without the ignore defense effect, if you are able to land the defense down and you have a 6-star cruelty blessing on your champions to drop the defense even more, I think a Thurvold, as an example, he might still do crazy good damage on this boss, or a Little Miss Annie, right? This type of champions that hit really, really hard. But you do need that HP burn in there. If not, the boss will reflect so much damage back onto you that your champions will actually die. So he seems actually pretty interesting. Moving on to the next one, we have Isheth the Crimson Siren. She looks pretty cool. I love the design on all of the bosses though. This is a Force Affinity boss, and with the first skill, attacks all enemies, increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn, and will instantly activate 1 random continuous heal buff on all allies. Once again, we might not have minions with these bosses. I think they've created them like this to have an interaction with each other when you fight all of the 5 bosses at the same time. And it seems very challenging just by looking at these 2 champions. Imagine the other 3. With the second skill, Siren's Kiss, places a continuous heal buff on all allies for 3 turns and instantly activates all of the continuous heals. She seems to be more of a supporter. Then attacks all enemies with the third skill, removes all buffs from all enemies, places a Master Seal and a block passive skills debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Voucher, buff strip, Master Seal debuff, and block passive skills. Of course, having immunity here will be important, but having protected immunity is going to be even more important, because you don't want to have tons of buffs that can be basically dispelled from you, right? Because if you get a block passive skills and the Master Seal on, you're going to be in trouble. Then the first passive, the damage inflicted by the boss increases by 5% for each buff she is currently under. So you want to have block buffs or buff strippers in your team to make sure she won't be able to accumulate a lot of buffs, especially those continuous heals. Then, whenever a continuous heal buff activates on an ally, fills her thermiter by 5% and increases her HP by 5%, stacking up to 100%. So an AoE block buffs might be one of your best friends versus this boss, especially if you're gonna take on all of them. Then we have the next passive. Her and all allies are immune to damage dealt based on enemy max HP. And all of her allies and herself will deal pure damage, which means it will ignore any mitigation effects and defense. Wow! Okay, so enemy max HP completely useless if you're going versus the 5 bosses. That is just crazy. Like, what are we gonna use in here? HP burn, 1% max HP damage. They will deal pure damage to our team, which is crazy. They will strip buffs, which will make it hard to use block damage and stuff like that. It's gonna be reliable on RNG. But this is a very crazy passive right here. I don't think you want to fight all of them together, man. Like, you might want to do that once they are basically going to put in a great hole for it. She's immune to decreased speed and thermiter reduction, and the same story with the HP burn. But what I am not seeing in here is the passive, the Almighty Strength. So the champions dealing enemy max HP damage do not have that cap. I'm not seeing it here on the passives. Either Plarium forgot to introduce it on this file, or this boss will take normal damage from enemy max HP champions on her own. Actually, no. Why? Wait. I'm stupid. Pardon me. Why would they put that when they've already put it in the giggles of the region, right? She's immune to enemy max HP completely. So yeah, forget about it. Enemy max HP champions will not work versus this one, okay? Not at all. Forget that I said what I just said. So we might rely again on Geomancer. Geomancer is always the right champion to deal with these bosses. But no, Geomancer will be useless versus this boss because his passive deals damage based on enemy max HP. So Geomancer will be completely useless versus this boss. Same with Marius, Newt, Acrisia, and every single one of the enemy max HP champions. That is so nasty. Poison's detonation deals damage based on enemy max HP. That won't work either. Wow, everything is crazy with this boss. Then we have Maximoz, the Whipping Blade. This is a Spirit Affinity boss. With A1 attacks all enemies, increases the duration of all debuffs on each target by 1 turn, and instantly activates 1 poison debuff on each target. So he's definitely gonna land a lot of poisons on us. Immunity, once again, our best friend. Then, with the second skill, Bringer of Desolation, attacks all enemies twice. The first hit places a weaken and a poison sensitivity for 2 turns. The second will place 3 poisons for 3 turns. Now, if he cannot land any poisons, he won't be able to activate any poisons at all. With the first, actually with the third skill, sorry, we're going to get into the passive in a second. Attacks all enemies, increases the cooldown of all enemy skills by 1 turn, and places poison debuffs on each enemy for 2 turns. The number of poison debuffs placed on each enemy is equal to the number of skills currently on cooldown. Whoa. So if you have 3 skills and he locks them all, he's going to put 3 poisons. Yep, that's exactly how this is going to work. Removes all debuffs from himself and places a poison cloud buff on him for 2 turns. Now this is going to be hard to deal with. The poison cloud won't allow you to do normal damage, and that will be on a 3-turn cooldown. You're literally going to have 1 turn to do good damage on this boss, because he's going to cleanse the block buffs if you're applying it anyway, right? Not that great. It sounds like the first skill and second, not such a big deal, but the third one is going to be the problem because of that poison cloud. I think we have a few champions that ignore poison cloud, but there are not that many. And you could, of course, build champions on Affinity Breaker set that directly counters this, but is only a chance for it to basically transform the weak hits into strong hits. That could potentially be one of those options. Then, the first passive, Living Tragedy. Whenever Maximoz is attacked, decreases the duration of all buffs on the attacker by 1 turn, which sucks. If the attack lands a weak hit, decreases the duration of all buffs on the attacker by 2 turns instead, and will fill his turn meter by 10% whenever he receives a weak hit. So that poison cloud is literally going to be on a 2-turn cooldown. If you're not running Affinity Breaker, there's no way to basically counter it if you don't bring other champions that ignore that effect or Affinity Breaker. You're going to give him so much turn meter with the weak hits that he's going to rotate so fast that he's going to feel like this skill is going to be on a 2-turn cooldown and constantly have that poison cloud on himself. Really not that great. Then, the second passive, Maximoz and all allies are immune to poison debuffs. Enemies under poison debuffs will receive 100% more damage from poison debuffs whenever him or his allies are attacked by an enemy under a poison debuff. It will decrease the active skill cooldown of any allies targeted by that attack by 1 turn, and occurs once per skill. You definitely do not want to fight all of these bosses together. There's just so many overwhelming mechanics that are pretty much countering everything that we have in the game. Everything that we know at the moment is countered by these bosses just by putting them together. No enemy max HP, no ignore defense effects, no damage from these, decrease their cooldowns when you attack them. There's just so much crap happening. It just seems like impossible mission when you put them all together. Also, instantly activates all poison debuffs on the attacker when him or his allies are attacked, and occurs once per skill. So you do not want to have poisons. You want to have that freaking immunity on. You want to cleanse those poisons as much as possible. He will decrease the duration of buffs on your team, which is very painful. I feel like champions that reset cooldowns can be very effective in here to keep that immunity on for as long as possible, because activating poisons, they deal more damage from poison. It's just too much, man. It's just too much. And of course, the same passives as the rest. I'm not going to read them all because this is standard now for all of the bosses. 5% enemy max HP, 1% of with HP burn, immune to decreased speed and turn meter. The heck, bruv. Then we have Tauraze, the Bestial Flame, which is a magic affinity boss. Fume Cleaver attacks all enemies twice. Each hit has a chance of instantly activating HP burn debuff. If there are no enemies under an HP burn debuff, has a chance of decreasing the cooldown of the slash and burn skill by 1 turn, which is the second skill, and he will attack all enemies, place an HP burn debuff for 3 turns, and block active skills for 2 turns. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of debuffs coming from these bosses. Immunity cleanse is literally the #1 weapon versus them. Then we have the Inferno Incarnate, which is the third skill, which will place a counterattack on himself for 2 turns. And remember, the A1 is AoE that activates HP burn. Really not great. I mean, are you lucky enough to have Ashnar? You're goated versus this boss, but without it, it's not going to be that fun. Then he will place a shield on himself for 2 turns, and the value of the shield is equal to 30% of his max HP, and the buff cannot be removed. But at least you can block it with block buffs. So far, only one of the bosses is making the block buffs useless because he cleanses before, but it works on pretty much all of the other ones. Then, moving on to the first passive, Wildfire Soul. Whenever he is attacked by an enemy under an HP burn, extends the duration of that burn by 1 turn per hit received. It will fill his turn meter by 20% per hit received whenever he is attacked by an enemy without an HP burn. So yes, you definitely want to bring in Ashnar. Will not fill his turn meter if he is also under a freeze debuff. So landing freeze on this boss, it seems to be a thing. You can actually land freeze on him, which is very, very helpful. Newt can land a freeze versus this boss, which is great. Then, the second passive, him and his allies are immune to HP burn debuffs. Enemies under HP burn debuffs will receive 100% more damage from HP burn debuffs, heals all allies by 2% of their max HP whenever an HP burn debuff is activated. So, they're literally making it impossible to fight these bosses together. I know it needs to be a crazy, crazy challenge, but they're immune to ignore defense. They're immune to ignore defense effects. They're immune to enemy max HP. They're immune to poisons. They're immune to HP burn. I mean, what is gonna deal damage versus these bosses? Ourselves? Either way, he is not immune to freeze, which is good, and the rest of the passives are pretty much the same. Nothing related to the HP burn because he is immune to HP burn. So that's one thing coming. And the final mean big boss, Leshun the Entangled One, which is a void boss, brings in a new debuff by the looks of it. With A1 is an AoE attack, and the damage received by targets under an Entangle debuff is reduced by 50%. Okay, so if he lands that debuff on us, his damage is reduced. I'm a bit confused by that part. But hey, if it reduces the damage, I'll take it. Unless I'm misunderstanding something. The damage received by targets under an Entangled debuff is reduced. Okay, so if they have the debuff, the damage is reduced. Has a chance of placing a True Fear debuff on targets without an Entangled debuff for a turn. And let's see what Entangled does. A champion under an Entangled debuff will not receive any positive effects from their allies, including buffs, will not have their turn meter passively increased. When placed, a champion receiving the Entangled debuff will have all of their buffs removed, but can still receive additional debuffs. The Entangled debuff has no duration, and therefore cannot have its duration increased or decreased. The Tangled debuff also cannot be spread to other champions. You can only remove an Entangled debuff by actively filling the champion's turn meter to 100%. And how is that possible? I mean, you're just gonna let the tick, turn. I reached 100, the debuff expires. Because there is no champion to fill your turn meter to 100%. So it's a bit odd. But sounds like a strong debuff. Probably you're not going to be able to receive healing either, because that is a positive effect, even though it's not mentioned in there. I'm curious to see if you can heal or you cannot heal. Then you have Gloom Wrecker. On a 4-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies before attacking, removes all debuffs from himself, and removes all buffs from all enemies. Once again, protected buffs will be extremely important. The damage inflicted by this skill and the amount of defense ignored against each target increases by 5% for each buff and debuff removed. So the more debuffs you land on him and you allow him to cleanse, the more problems you're going to have. The more buffs he's going to remove from your team, the more problems you're going to have. Sounds very tough. Then you have Torn Prison, the third skill, which attacks all enemies under an Entangled debuff and decreases each target's turn meter by 30%. If there are no enemies under an Entangled debuff, attacks the enemy with the highest speed. Places a protected Entangled debuff. This debuff cannot be evaded, redirected to another target, or resisted. The debuff will also ignore Stone Skin. Ooh. So probably this is the very first skill that the boss is using. I think so. I think this might be the very first skill that the boss is using. So he's going to target the champion with the highest speed. Now we're going to need to trick the boss in here. We cannot use the support champion, the reviver, with the highest speed because he's going to get hammered. So we're going to have to play around and trick this boss by putting the highest speed on a different champion that's not as important. Then you have the first passive, Sublimate Life. Places a protected Entangled debuff on the enemy with the highest speed. Also places a Siphon debuff, which is another new debuff, on the enemy with the highest speed for 3 turns. These debuffs cannot be evaded, redirected to another target, resisted, or blocked. So immunity will be useless anyway. Stone Skin will be useless anyway. And Taunt will be useless as well, because the debuffs will ignore Stone Skin and Taunt. The Siphon. Under a champion under a Siphon debuff will have 5% of their stat values siphoned by the debuff producer, except ignore defense. Each time the debuff producer takes a turn, an additional 5% of the stat value will be stolen, stacking up to 50%. For example, a champion with 1000 attack under Siphon will initially have their attack decreased by to 950, and the debuff producer's attack will be increased by 5%. Each time the debuff producer takes a turn, an additional 5% of the target's stats will be siphoned to them. Do you know what that means? Your speed, your accuracy, your resistance, your defense, your HP, everything from that one champion will go on to this freaking boss every time it takes a turn. That is just crazy stupid, bro. Come on. 2 new debuffs, both of them very powerful. I mean, I think we're just gonna have to build a bait champion with low stats on everything. Just speed, which will give the boss a lot of additional speed. And just let that champion die every now and then and just revive him. Or I'm not even sure exactly how that will play out. I guess if the champion dies, the Siphon debuff goes away. He's not going to gain those additional stats either. So that can be part of the strategy. Then we have the Parasitic Growth passive. My goodness. Whenever a True Fear debuff placed by him is activated, fills the thermometer of himself and all allies by 10%, and will also decrease the duration of all debuffs on himself and the allies by 1 turn. At the start of his turn, deals damage to all enemies under Entangled debuff. The damage dealt is equal to 20% of each target's max HP. Also destroys each target's max HP by 20% of the damage dealt. If an enemy under an Entangled debuff is killed by damage from this skill, places a protected Entangled debuff on the enemy with the next highest speed. Also places a True Fear debuff on all enemies without an Entangled debuff for 1 turn. At the start of his turn, every time he takes a turn, he's gonna do this. Every time he takes a turn, he's gonna do this. So we cannot let that champion die, because he's gonna target the next champion with the highest speed. And the next, and the next. So they thought about this as being a counter to it, and it seems like they came with a solution straight away. This boss sounds very, very, very powerful. If the rest sounds strong to you guys, forget about them, because they are literally peanuts compared to this one. The next passive, Elder Tree, decreases all incoming damage by 60% if he is not under an HP burn debuff. So once again, it's clearly telling you, do not attack them all together. They're going to be immune to HP burn if you attack them all together. And how the heck are you meant to deal damage if his damage will be reduced by an additional 60% on top of immune to poison, immune to HP burn, immune to enemy max HP, immune to ignore defense? What will deal damage versus this boss? You're probably going to be in there for 5-6 days trying to kill the boss. That's crazy. Also has a chance to change an incoming critical hit into a weak hit if he is not under an HP burn. Yeah, so HP burn is going to be mandatory in here. Crazy, crazy powerful. Thermometer field effects are 30% more effective on enemies under an Entangled debuff if he is under an HP burn. So thermometer field effects are 30% more effective on enemies. He drops thermometer. He drops thermometer, so he's basically going to drop even more thermometer if he is under an HP burn, but at least you can deal damage. And of course, at least he is immune. He's not immune to thermometer reduction and decreased speed. All thermometer reduction effects are decreased by 50% when used against this boss. Then we have the Almighty Strength and the HP burn. So he's not immune to decreased speed, and we can manipulate his thermometer, but only a 50% effect of it. Wowcher. Crazy, crazy, crazy bosses, but I feel like these 4, they're doable. You can deal with them independently. This boss is crazy powerful on his own. I cannot imagine fighting this boss together with the other 4. It's like Mission Impossible. And I'm honestly so curious if anyone will be able to defeat all 5 of them in the first rotation. I don't think so. I don't think so. I would love Plarium to share this data with us, but I know for a fact they will not, because I don't think it will look good for them if nobody is able to do it, right? But then it might be good because it's a big, big challenge, a huge accomplishment, and I think they should reward the first time people doing it. I think they should give them something. I don't care what. Maybe an exclusive avatar or an exclusive frame, just to allow them to flex their capability to defeat these 5 bosses together. I think it's probably going to be the biggest accomplishment in Raid Shadow Legends. Forget about getting a trophy in Platinum Arena with all the stuff in there, or the trophy in Live Arena, the CVC trophies. Forget about all that crap. This right here, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest accomplishment players can have in Raid Shadow Legends. Defeat all of those 5 bosses at the same time, considering that they're countering every single known damage mechanic we have in this game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. As usual, appreciate every single one of you guys watching. Much love, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.